A new homeschool year doesn't need to mean more stress, more planning, or more overwhelm. The Peaceful Press can help you make this year simple, meaningful, and joyful. If you're starting out with early years, grab the Peaceful Preschool, where we teach children all the letters A to Z with numbers and everything they need for preschool, or Peaceful Preschool Volume 2, which is our seasons-based preschool resource. We have the Nourishing Nature Kindergarten. It's our award-winning kindergarten program. And then if you're learning in elementary, we have our wonderful history-based elementary resources. You could study the American history for America's 250th birthday with the Playful Pioneers, or Playful Pioneers Volume 2. And then we also have world history with the Precious People and European history with the Kind Kingdom. These resources have brought joy to family. They're full of faith and encourage simple, peaceful homeschool rhythms. Right now, you can save 20% off all digital products. This offer is only good until August 12th. Use code BACKTOSCHOOL26 at thepeacefulpress.com to save 20% on all our digital products. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about life-giving habits for flourishing families. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be chatting with Nathan King from CTC Math. Math has been my hardest subject to teach. Unfortunately, none of my children have gone into math-related careers because it was really a struggle for me based on the way I was educated in math. And through the years, I found some resources. My kids were able to go to college and do the basics that they needed for their arts degrees, lawyer, PhD, JD in law, business degree. But I wasn't able to get them past that kind of hump. And I'm so excited to have you demystify math a little bit for us, Nathan, especially for people like myself who didn't have a strong math background.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think in some ways, many people believe that there is math people, right? And that's actually not true. There is no such thing as a math person. There's no such thing as someone who can't do math. We all can. The reality is that because of our emotionalism, as human beings. Sometimes that actually can just be really hard for us because we had a negative experience, or maybe we had a gap in our understanding. I mean, that's the real problem is if I don't understand something in math and people keep on referring back to those things, I can feel like, man, I'm just not good at this. But it's not true. I just have some gaps in my understanding. And so the problem isn't really us. It's not really, it's not the parents. It's not the teachers per se. It's just these gaps that kind of form underneath in the teaching. And learning math is actually not that hard. Teaching it can be a challenge, right? I mean, that can be the reality, but the actual learning of it doesn't have to be that hard. We just emotionally think sometimes that we're just not math people, and it's just not true.
This is so encouraging. I was private schooled in my earliest years of education, and it was a Christian, small Christian school at a church, and they used a workbook curriculum that really did all math completely abstract, from the beginning. Like, wow. I don't remember if we ever even counted pictures, but we definitely never counted real objects. And so I've been a big advocate in the earlier years of doing math that's a little bit more hands-on. And then I've ended up outsourcing, even with my youngest son, I had him in a math class in junior high even, because I recognize with the older kids, like I remember my daughter trying to get through algebra and using a video-based algebra that was popular at the time, and just like so frustrated. I could not help her. I had also 6 other younger students to help. And so we did end up as a family using a computer-based math program that kind of saved us because I couldn't teach. Like, math does need a teacher. This is one of the things I've realized is that math needs somebody to, you need to have it explained to you. And it needs to be understandable, and you need to know how to get to the answer. You need the solutions. And if you as a mom are bouncing between multiple levels of children, it's hard to do that. So what are some of the ways that CTC helps homeschool families do give quality math instruction, especially if you're homeschooling multiple ages?
Oh no, fantastic. I mean, and I'm totally with you. You know, if when we had math years ago that was abstract, you just I don't know what to do. You know, I totally get that. But to answer your question, as far as how CTC Math helps with that, look, we start with a short, succinct math lesson. Okay, it's a video lesson. The child can watch it as many times as they need to, and we really actually engineer those to be as clear as possible. And so the child understands what's going on, and each one of our lessons is just bit by bit, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and we go in that incremental way to go all the way up to as far as they want to go in math. And so if you have a child that's a fifth grader and a child that's a seventh grader, they can go directly to where they need to go, right where they're at, so they're not forming any gaps. And so they can just start moving up that ladder with CTC Math. And so each child can watch their video. They watch as many times as they want, and they go straight into just practice that actually is right at their level. So if a student is struggling, they can the practice actually becomes easier. If a student is rising to the challenge, then the challenge or the practice becomes more challenging. And that's really, really helpful, because then students succeed, they win bit by bit, just a little bit at a time, right? And every one of those wins, every time you win, that over time explains to you or proves to you that you actually can do this thing called math. See, math is not actually hard to learn if you believe you can do it and if you're taught it in the right way. And so that's encouraging, because if you just do a little bit at a time, you're able to keep moving forward and getting those wins, you will become a math student that is successful.
Yeah. A lot of our families are transitioning into high school. You know, with the Peaceful Press, we especially support families in grades, you know, preschool through 8th grade with homeschooling. And then a lot of them are transitioning into high school. And that's when I think families especially are coming up against these feelings of inadequacy. Yeah. Yours was one of my friends who did do a lot of research into homeschool curriculum. This is what she used in high school. Why do families choose CTC Math for high school? What makes it special compared to some of the other programs that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, that is a common issue that comes up in homeschooling. I'm in high school now, and man, I used to be able to do the math, but it's beyond me, right? I mean, you feel that way. And the reality is that it's okay to partner with somebody else, just like you're already mentioning. It's okay to partner with somebody else. You do need a good math teacher, and if you can partner with somebody that's able to explain it clearly, you know, at just a bit at a time, and help that student to continue to have those wins as they move up, your child can succeed at whatever level. And you know, and we go K through 12 through that. And so families come to us because they can get one program that works with all of their students, right, at their level. Parents are told exactly where the student is. We have really great reporting features, and so they're able to see exactly where their student is. But they don't actually have to do the teaching itself. They can come alongside, they can support, and they can see exactly what's going. Hey, it looks like fractions are hard for you. What's going on? You know, you can still provide that coaching. That's vital, right? I mean, you love your children, and so you can be that support for them, but you're not actually responsible to master the content. You can come alongside them and kind of be the guide alongside them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an encouraging idea that we don't have to be responsible for every aspect of homeschooling. I think that's one of the things that really stumbles parents, especially as they're making those decisions, even into high school, is like, I can't do everything. I can't be responsible for everything. How do you know, a lot of our families are very low tech families. Like they really try to not do everything online. But also, like for some of these subjects, it's a big asset. You know, I actually used during COVID for a little while, we used some Khan Academy lessons because I needed the assistance. Like there were things that I just didn't know how to teach. Right. And I think that's amazing that you can get I didn't realize that you could get every level of CTC Math for one subscription. Yeah. But how do families avoid just having their kids online all day? Because one of the things that we came up against with some of as our kids transitioned into even we were doing a computer math program, is that some of my kids were like bouncing off of their math and playing a video game when my back was turned. And so how do you help families be responsible to like do the online stuff that's necessary, because some subjects, typing is another one where you really can't teach typing analog, you know what I mean?
Right. You
And
need a keyboard,
so
you know.
yeah, so
Yeah.
what are some of these, what are some of the things that you would say to families to help safeguard their kids when they're doing online schoolwork?
No, that's a real concern. I totally get where you're coming from on that. To answer the larger question first, which is, what about technology in the classroom? Technology is not always appropriate. It's not always the right solution. In the case of mathematics, of course, we would make the case that you can see that use it as a textbook, if you will, because it's giving you the information. We still actually advocate that you use paper. Okay, so while yes, it is on the computer is being delivered, the content's being delivered on the computer. Actually, we advocate that you continue to use the old school method of actually writing down on paper. It's essential to be able to have that skill. And the reality is, I know that so many students they balk at that and they say, oh, I do it in my head, whatever. But the reality is, by doing it on paper, you actually save a tremendous amount of that brain space that you need to be able to do mathematics. And so even if you can do it a little bit when you're younger, you need to have the skill. So we do advocate that. As far as how we help with that and how I would encourage parents to actually deal with this issue, we have some reporting features that really help parents to see what their children have accomplished. And so it gives them pretty good reporting of what has actually happened in those sessions. And so when a parent looks at those sessions, there can be some telltale signs if something was not being pursued, not being done to its fullest effort level, I suppose. And so, the parents can look at those reports and they can see what their students did and what maybe they didn't do, and they can help with the accountability that needs to happen there as parents. And that's the reality, is that, if we're taking on home education, even if we're partnering with somebody, we're not completely walking away. Right? I mean, we're still part of this. The question is, do I have a tool that's going to be able to help me do that more effectively or more efficiently, and make it easier on mom and dad? So we don't have to be the math teacher, but we can have a tool that makes it so that our math time is effective and that our students are benefiting from that, and we're still able to keep tabs on what's really going on. And so I would encourage parents to use those reporting features. And if a curriculum doesn't have that, that would be unfortunate.
Right. I think that's really good that you include that, because one of the issues for a lot of families who are teaching multiple levels, this is something I encountered, is that if you don't give pretty quick feedback to your kids on whether their answer was right or wrong, then you're going to have a hard time later on. Like by the time you do the grading, for example, I was teaching 5 or 6 students at the same time. And so some of the younger ones, I was doing direct teaching with them, but then there got to a point where they were maybe at the time doing like what was a popular textbook math in that season. But if they did their pages, they did their lessons, and I didn't grade it until a week later, they were already totally lost. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to have very quick feedback on your math. Otherwise you're building on a faulty foundation.
Absolutely. No.
And so this is why, like, it can get, one of the taglines on your website is like, no more stress over math, because I think that's what starts to get really stressful for a homeschool mom, is you're trying to teach math to all these different levels, and then you're totally overwhelmed with it. And, partly I've started advocating for families in the earlier years to even combine grade levels so that you are reinforcing the same things to, for instance, if you had a second grader and a third grader, choose one level for both of them. And then you're able to, in your extra time or in your direct teaching time, reinforce the same things. How much time is it taking for families to get through, for instance, a CTC math lesson?
Sure. No, that's a great point. And I'll answer that question. But first, I do want to mention, you mentioned, getting immediate feedback. And that is, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right, especially on math, because as you mentioned, if you're going through a worksheet and you have 30 problems and you get 10 of them wrong, but you have no idea, right? I mean, you're still getting it right. That's discouraging, at the end of the day. And so that is something that CTC Math offers, is that we have instant feedback, and so that's how that practice actually works. The student student, if they get it right, you get the feedback, hey, this is right. If you get it wrong, it tells you why. Right. And so the student can start doing it. It gets easier, but it also tells you why, so they can actually learn from that mistake and not continue to make those same mistakes. We want to encourage them with lots of small wins. And so that's definitely a win. Now, when it comes to multiple levels, multiple grade levels, that's when it comes to like literature and those kinds of things, you have a lot more play, right? You have a lot more leeway that you can bring. When it comes to math, it really is important that it is at the student's level. So, combining a fourth grader and a second grader, unless they're at the exact same place, then it would be appropriate, right? But otherwise, it's helpful to have them have their own specific math program that they're working through, and CTC Math allows that. You can have multiple students doing that. But you asked how long it takes, and really, my own personal experience with my own children, I'll just tell you that, is it takes them anywhere from about 15 to 20 minutes per lesson. Now, please understand, everybody's different. Right? Everybody's different. And so one student might, watch a video several times. And so you need to take that into account and say, okay, wait a second. Just because Mr. Nathan King, his kids were doing 15 minutes doesn't mean that my student will. If it takes them, less time, or if it takes them more, that's okay, right? Because we want to be at their own pace. That's one of the key ideas, is that if I'm learning it at my own pace and I'm getting these wins at my own pace, eventually, not only do I become competent at math, right? I become able to do it. I can do the thing. I also begin to get confident in math, right? Because I'm winning all the time. And when you're really good at something, you don't tend to hate that thing.
That's true. I love that you pointed that out. And it just comes from understanding. I'd love to hear some of the ways that you guys help people understand a subject like you guys have Algebra 2. You have CTC Math has pre-calculus, including trigonometry. And, I think for a lot of homeschoolers, they're not getting that far. Like I know a lot of homeschool families where the highest level they taught in their homeschool was Algebra 1, and then maybe their kids took a class at a community college.
Sure.
So how, I'd love to hear some of the outcomes even for families who've done CTC Math, like what percentage of students are making it all the way through calculus? Because in today's world, those higher maths are so important for many of the careers that are AI proof.
Yeah, it's a STEM world, right? The science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Yeah, absolutely. And so let me give you an example of one particular student. We'll call him Wally. But Wally, he actually was, I think he was in about, I don't know, he was getting 40%, 41%, something like that at one point, and was just really, really struggling. But we helped him with what we call it explicit instruction, meaning it's like very clear. We model it. Here's how it's done. Do it after me. That kind of that's how we do our instruction at any level. By the way, you ask all the way up through calculus. We're doing exactly the same thing. We're telling them exactly how to do it. We're modeling it. They're doing it with us, right? And then we go straight into that practice that gets easier. It gets easier or more challenging depending on what the student, where they're at. So the same thing. We did this with Wally, and Wally, it was only a few months later, and he was getting like 91%. I mean, it was incredible, the transformation that took place in that young man, and we have lots of stories like that. And so that's the kind of thing that we can see when a student actually gets the gaps filled. Right, their learning gaps are filled, and they're able to do bit by bit, win by win. That's what can happen, and so they can, and it doesn't matter what mathematics you're talking about. If it's whether it's kindergarten, whether it's calculus, it's the same thing. Once they have that mastery, we call it a mastery approach. Once they have that mastery, and they have something called automaticity, where you get really good at a certain math skill. The kind of basic math skills. If you get really, really good at those, like your times tables, for example, or dividing things or whatever. If you get really good at those, it doesn't take up any more of your brain, right, to do those things. And we advocate for that, because eventually we want to do more complicated kinds of things, right? But it always starts with those basic skills, taught well, modeled, and they follow through with practice immediately. That gives them immediate feedback. And that's what CTC Math does.
Wow. It's really confirms what I've read about, teaching science and maths. There's a book called Hero Education by Oliver DeMille, and he talks about how, when you're teaching math and science, you start with basic principles, and so even the basic history of math and science, teaching some of Galen's discoveries, or Herodotus, the really early scientist, because when you can start with those most basic of principles or discoveries, then kids have something to build on.
Yeah.
And so, in our, like in the Peaceful Press preschool and elementary, those are the only resources that we include math instruction. We do a lot of hands-on math, a lot of, counting concrete objects, a lot of playing games with math. How does, games and concrete math skills like measuring things, or, you know, using objects to count, to skip count, things like that. How does that play into your understanding of quality math instruction?
When you have things that you can touch and you can feel, you can show it to students and they can do it too, right? This is fantastic, because it is that instruction that's very clear, we want to show them exactly how it's done, model it, but then they can do it. And that's why those things that you can see and touch are so fantastic, especially at those young ages, because not only is the comprehension, the understanding coming, but they get to actually do the thing with you. And so in that sense, it's great for building those basic skills. Fantastic. And games, in my experience, are fantastic for that. Games really don't lend themselves to, kind of the higher, more abstract kinds of stuff, generally speaking. At least I'm not aware of those that do, but they work really great for those basic skills. And so I think that is fantastic. And they have this added benefit where they're kind of fun, right?
Right.
So that's, little kids, why not? Let's leverage that.
Yeah, some of the families that you've noticed in your years of working with CTC Math, some of the families that you've noticed who've really excelled in the maths and sciences, what do you think some of the characteristics, like the things that they do as a family? I know one family, they were very diligent about math drills. Like they definitely did their math flashcards. Another family, they definitely did play some games as part of their family culture. Like they played a lot of Catan, actually. And so in your experience working with families and seeing families who are excelling at math, what are some of those kind of characteristics of families whose children are gaining understanding?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If you're playing with math, that says something about math, right? It's fun. Like there's a message there coming across, right? We've done it at our kitchen table, where we have these math games that we play, or whatever. And the reality is that tells my kids that math is fun, and it's something that we learn how to do. And if I learn how to do this thing, then I can beat dad. Oh man, I mean, we talk about incentive, right? I mean, and they get excited about that. And so I think that families that are enjoying the process together, and making it a positive experience, you can make math as dismal and horrible as you want. Why? Right? Instead, let's do something. Let's enjoy it together. Let's find ways to enjoy it together. And and that's not to put any no parent should feel bad if they haven't done that in the past. It's something you can start doing. Right? We can start today, and we can start doing those things. And there's great ways to make that happen. And so actually, you can go onto our website. We actually have a speed skills game. You don't even have to pay anything to do this. Just go to ctcmath.com, and you can scroll down to the bottom, and there's a speed skills game if you want to have your kids work with their multiplication tables, and you can do that as well. But that's not of course the only game. There's lots of games that are out there that allow for people to do that in their homes. But that's one of them you could use.
I love that. I think that as much, with math does seem like it lends itself really well to games, especially for reinforcement. When you look at some of the families who have come into the CTC Math ecosphere, because my friend who used it, she had already tried lots of other programs, and she had a lot of kids, so she probably was feeling really behind when she started. How long do you think it takes families or kids to catch up? Like, for instance, if you have a child who's coming in 7th grade, and this was probably typical of my son, my youngest had maybe a little bit of attention issues, or some stuff going on where it was a little bit hard teaching him math in the earlier years. Like we weren't getting as far as I wished we would have. But then he was able to, start with that seventh grade class and do algebra in high school and geometry in high school and had a great experience. And so what have you found to be sort of the catch up period in a sense for a mom who's feeling like, oh, I'm so far behind in math and I've been trying to teach my kids math, but they're in, sixth grade. They don't really know how to do long division, or, they're just feeling really discouraged about where they're at. Where would you have a family start, and how long do you think it takes them to catch up and sort of get on track?
No, that's a fantastic question. And the reality is it's going to depend on where the student is, right? If a student has just encountered just really hard, circumstances with math, and they just have had a really, really hard time, and they're completely, discouraged, it may take a while. And that's okay, right? Because what we're going to do is we may have to go back a couple grades, right? And we may have to start there, and we're going to try to fill in those gaps bit by bit. But as they get those small wins, right? And as they get those and they start moving forward, eventually they're going to hit a point where they say, okay, I can actually do this thing. But please understand that actually can take a couple years. In a situation that's more severe, it can take a couple years, and so there's no cause to be overwhelmed by that. It is okay to move forward bit by bit at someone's own pace. If you move forward from grade 2, math to grade 3.5 math for a fifth grader, isn't that better than not moving at all? Right? Of course it is. Of course it is. And the reality is, if in the midst of that fifth grader understands something, they say, wait a second, this math, this is okay. I think I'm okay with this. You won. You've won, because in sixth grade, he's going to start skyrocketing, right? This is not something that we need to be discouraged about. It's just a reality. And we have to take the deep breath, and we are patient, and we move through bit by bit, making sure that this student is winning as they're doing math. And that's how we would recommend that students do it, is they go back to where you have a difficulty, where you have a gap in your learning, start there and move forward. You know what, as a student, they might remember some of the things, along the way, and they may go faster than you think. They might go slower than you think. It's okay, because they're still moving forward, and that's the goal.
Yeah, this is really encouraging, I think, especially for families who are feeling so behind in math and discouraged about it, to know that it's okay to start where you are. If a family, for instance, they know, yeah, we've been struggling to try and implement math in our home. My sixth grader is a little bit behind. Where would you tell them to start?
I would have them look. We call it a diagnostic. It's basically a test where you're going to say, where is there a gap in their learning? And we have a few questions we ask them. And so you ask them, those questions about, hey, I think you're struggling in fifth grade fractions, let's just say. And so we give them a diagnostic on that. And if everything's showing up and they're answering all the questions correctly, move on. I mean, you don't need to go over something that they already have mastered, right? But as we go through our diagnostic, we're going to find those spaces where, wait a second, we're starting to miss some questions here, right? Let's start there. And then we move forward from that position, right? And so we will. That's what we advocate that you would do, is that you go to where that student has experienced a gap in their math knowledge and start there.
Okay. So for instance, then, if you discover that, oh, wow, my child does have a big gap and they need to actually start in fifth grade math, are they going to have to take a year, and be so, say they're in seventh grade and they find out there's a gap in fifth grade, are they going to be behind a couple years all the way through? Or could they move a little faster, like, for instance, test out of things?
We've had students zoom through grades once they believe they can do it. Once they believe that they can actually succeed, the sky's the limit. I can't guarantee that. Everybody's different, right? Everybody's different, but absolutely we've seen that happen. And they catch up and they even excel. There was a girl, I don't recall her name just off the top of my head, but she hated math so bad, but she went back and she started filling some gaps in, and she was winning. That's the point. We want them to win. And just really quickly here, if we do have a student who is really struggling, it's okay to do 10 minutes a day, end on a win. right? End on a win every day and make sure that they are experiencing success throughout that time period. Okay, I just want to point that out. But she did that, and over time she began to do it longer and longer and longer, and eventually she became a math major in college. I mean, this is so night and day compared to what, where she was. And forgive me, I don't remember her name just off the top of my head, but we've seen those stories, we've seen those things happen. And they are, it's fantastic. I do want to give a quick word of warning. You'd mentioned something earlier that I thought was really, really good. You said, games really is reinforcement, and I do want to point that out. If you're wanting to get into games and having fun with math with your family, make sure that they are games that your family already knows how to do, not the games themselves. I'm talking about the math behind them. Do not use games to teach math. You are absolutely right, Ms. Pepito. It is about reinforcement, and so I think that was a good point. I just wanted to give you kudos for that.
Yeah, this is really insightful because I think for some families they are feeling that stress, like you mentioned on the website, and wondering how they can get their child caught up. So you've seen, like, that's such an inspiring story that you've seen this girl who was behind, who was hating math, and then she learned to win at it so much that she ended up being a math major. What an inspirational story. Was did she end up sort of doing extra lessons every day? Was she kind of doubling up on her time on the website, or what was it that helped her sort of
To
move
do
forward
that.
so quickly?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the reality is that you can, since it's at your own pace, you can do a couple lessons a day if you want to. You have that capacity and that ability. And yes, she would have done that. I did not watch her exact progress personally, but in the arc of what she did, I think she did 2 grades in 1 year. And then she continued to move on. So I don't remember the exact arc of how she moved forward, but that's exactly what she did. She just kept going. She said, "I'm going to keep moving forward," and she liked it enough that the joy of it just took her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So inspiring. So you can double up on lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other ways that a child could move a little faster through the math if they had a goal to graduate early, maybe, or to get ahead of where they were? Because I think so often what discourages students is that feeling that they have no autonomy. When they feel like, oh, mom's not a good teacher and she's never going to teach me these things, and they can start to feel really discouraged with their learning. But when there is some autonomy, then they can actually make more progress than their mom maybe has time to give them herself, because
Right.
as busy homeschooling moms, so many of you listening, you are in that stage where you're like, you have a preschooler, you have a toddler, and then you have this middle schooler who needs math instruction, and you are trying to manage it all on top of the laundry and the meal prep. And so it can get really overwhelming. But if that older child has some autonomy with their learning, especially if they know how to manage themselves online, that can be very encouraging, that they're not stuck with only the math instruction their mom can give them.
Right. We give parents the tools to actually do the math instruction, right? We give them the lessons and all that. But there's a lot of settings that you can actually say, hey, I want my student to get 80% correct on these papers. And if they get 80% correct on these problems, then I view that as mastery, and we can move. You can stipulate that. You can say, hey, I want it to be this high or that high. And so a parent who realizes, if a student is saying, Mom, I think I can go faster, that kind of a thing, the parent can actually go in and change the settings so that the student can move through at whatever rate they agree is appropriate. And so you have that capacity. It is not limited by us. We give you the tools, and we'll show you how to use those. And if you ever have any questions, I mean, our customer service team is fantastic. They're very responsive, but we can help you to make the settings that are right for your student.
Wow, that's really encouraging too, because one of the other things that has bothered me about early years math instruction is how much work they're giving young kids. Like, to me, some of the research I've done has said that a lot of kids aren't even ready for abstract math instruction before ages 8 or so. And so with some of those early years math resources, there's like pages of worksheets that they're supposed to fill out. And sometimes your child already understands how to do it. Sometimes your child might have a motor skill issue where they're not quite ready to write that many problems in a day. Like, they don't have the fine motor, the pincher grip to write that many problems in a day. And so the fact that there's settings that you as the parent can input that means your child can move ahead a little faster, that seems like it'd be a real big help.
Jennifer, you're absolutely right, and that is, in CTC Math, in our video instruction, we try to make it extremely clear, whether we're using graphics or whether we, sometimes of course we're going to actually write things out, but we're going to give the students not only a visual representation of what's going on, we're also going to of course give them verbal representation of what's going on, so they have that instruction given to them very clearly. And little, younger kids, they need to have a lot of pictures to understand what's going on. And what you mentioned, as far as those things you can see and touch and feel, we do as much as we can, of course, in video, but we represent those things on our videos to the younger kids.
Yeah, and then they're not stuck filling out pages and pages of worksheets if they understand the material. You as the parent are sort of in control of that.
Absolutely. Wow. If a student isn't stuck, they can move on. If they're struggling a little bit, we can give them more practice, and that's the advantage of having an online platform, is that we can do some of those kinds of things. We can meet them right where they're at, and give them the tools they need to be able to succeed at whatever lesson they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be so encouraging for families listening. It's just that personalization of the math instruction. This is why I have advocated for combining grades if the understanding is there, because it's so important to give good instruction for math teaching. It's so important that someone is modeling how to do, double-digit multiplication, or that you're modeling how to carry numbers. All of these things for young children, it needs to be modeled really well. And if you're too busy to teach math properly, and you're just relying on them reading and understanding the instructions in the book, which a lot of kids, their comprehension isn't quite there yet to read and understand, especially in the early years. So I'm so excited for families to discover CTC Math. And you told me that you had a special coupon code for listeners of the Restoration Home podcast.
100%. And so, we would love to share that with your listeners. We have a 50% off for our homeschool audience. They can go to the link. I believe you're going to put it in your show notes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. So we have a link for you if you'd like to take advantage of that. It is a opportunity for you to get 50% off of CTC Math. And if you just want to check it out, you can at ctcmath.com/trial. And there's no credit card required, but you're able to kind of see what our system is like and what our lessons are like. And you can enjoy those that way. But if you're ready, you can get that 50% off. And once you get 50% off, we always offer you 50% off, even when you're renewing.
Okay, wow. So I'm going to put that link in the show notes. If you can use the link that I put in the show notes, that'll get you the 50% off. It'll also help CTC Math know that you're clicking on it from the Restoration Home podcast. So we're so thankful for this insight today, Nathan. It was a big struggle for me in my homeschool, and definitely the source of a little bit of guilt, honestly, with how well I could prepare my children for math based on my own math understanding. And so I've been so excited to be able to help my listeners maybe avoid some of my mistakes and be able to give their children better math instruction. This has been an insightful conversation. I know the Restoration Home community is going to appreciate it so much.
Hey, Jennifer, I really appreciate the time, and thanks for sitting down with me today.